City Council meeting to order. I ask that you rise for a moment of reflection and Pledge of Allegiance, and to kind of recognize the 23rd anniversary of the tragic events of 9/11. We will have a moment of silence in lieu of that moment of reflection this evening. Thank you. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson? Here. Mrs. Hoover?
Here.
Miss Royce? Here. Mrs. Bowling?
Here.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Here.
Mr. Girton?
Here.
Mr. Braden?
Here.
We have all members present this evening. Moving on to amendment of the agenda. There is only one, and that is to remove the minutes from August 27th. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Make a motion to amend the agenda as stated.
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to amend the agenda as stated. Mrs. Hoover.
I second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson? Yes. Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Miss Royce? I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to minutes of the previous meeting. These are the minutes from the August 13th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as if read? Mrs. Franzen.
I'll move to approve the minutes as if read.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen. Is there a second? Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Motion is to accept the minutes as if read. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Miss Royce? I'll vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to special presentations. We have Project Coordinator Darren Hackworth.
Come on. Well, thanks, Council. Thanks, President, Council, Mayor, Keith. I'm just going to go through my PowerPoint here and what a great year 23 was. And I'm going over the 23 projects for right now. And we had a wide array of projects, and it was a good year. You know, this room here being one of them. And you'll see in the pictures and stuff when I get ready to present them. So I'd like to go through them right now. I can figure out how to work the clicker. It's not working.
Oh, there you go.
Hang on a minute. Got to turn it on.
There we go.
Okay, so I'll go through my little bullet point here. It's like, as a project manager for the city, I'm responsible for management and coordination of a wide array of projects. Duties include plan, execute, and complete and maintenance. Planning and budgeting, at the end of each year, I begin by communicating with department heads to understand the future project goals. I then calibrate with the administration to incorporate as many of the goals as possible into the budget. The execution part of it is when I formulate the total scope of work, obtain 3 quotes for each project, and negotiate a finalize a budget. Once the budget is set, I select a contractor and work closely with them daily to ensure high quality work. And the completion of this goal is upon project completion, I conduct a thorough walkthrough with the contractor to verify that all work is completed and scoped for sign off on the final invoice. And also I facilitate the maintenance and mechanical needs of all the buildings, parks, playgrounds. And last year, we had an estimated cost of over $150,000 just in repairs. So, we got a lot of old buildings, you know. So, we'll go through the projects here. You'll see the ones that are highlighted will be the ones I got pictures of. So you'll see the pictures of the ones in red. City Hall, council chambers, and really I don't need to read through all these because it will be here for a while. There's a lot of projects. So I'll hold them here for a second, then you guys can look at them, and we'll go on to the next week and see the pictures and stuff. This is council chambers. As you can see, the difference is amazing. This project started in October of 22 with engineering plans, drawings, and stuff just to get it all together. And then we had our production, the movie production here, and then that was, took a while. So then we didn't start until April of 24, April of 24, and in August we finished up. So right now, this is the auditor's office renovation. As you can tell, this was we moved some walls and stuff like that in there. This was an area that was badly needed, and all it's just a really improvement, much needed improvement. This right here is your buildings department. The buildings department just needed a little upgrade. They just need some painting, some ceiling tiles. The guys in there keep it up pretty clean. They keep it really nice. Mike and Mark and them guys, they do a really good job just keeping it up. Right here, this is everybody calls it the crow's nest, bird's nest, or whatever. This was the law department's storage area where we had some broken windows and pigeons got in there, and this was a room that was neglected for years. And as you can tell, there was files that were ruined. We kept what we could, and but it was a big change once you get it. This was a project from an environmental standpoint, from an environmental company called Rainbow, who came in and did a cleaned all the files they could clean, and made it safe for us to go in there and be able to utilize this room again. But that was a nice project. We go on the recreation department. We had the wide array of projects there. We had electrical panel upgrade, water avenue entry overhang repair, which was falling off basically. So I call it a project. It's really not a repair. I should have called it a project. Landscaping, club room flooring, office flooring, waterworks pool, the concrete resurfacing, which you'll see highlighted here. Repair lifeguard chairs, which were real bad shape. Resurfacing of tennis courts, installation of 2 pickleball courts. This was the pool area where it was resurfaced. This is the tennis courts where we made 2 pickleball courts and stuff. It was a much needed improvement also. I guess everything I do is much needed improvement. Community center classrooms, the handicap handicap ramp, for the lower level. That was a project started in 22, in November of 22, and was finished in February of 23. So I always put the 23 projects when they're finished on here. As you can see the difference, just in these few pictures. I could have put a lot of pictures on all these areas, but we'd been here all night. I take a lot of pictures, Police department. This was a lot of work here. HVAC you don't really see, but we had HVAC leaking in there constantly. It was needed a big overhaul for the HVAC. Flooring throughout, first floor, ceiling tile, new lights, retaining wall, shed, for the shed to sit on because they had their shed sitting in the parking lot of the apartment. They needed all the parking they can get because, they just didn't have it. Completion of women's locker room. The women's locker room started in 22 also and finished up in March of 23. This is your, this is your retaining wall for this. This is where we did the shed up on top of the wall, where they, and it's more, because you can see the area now, they have a flat area for really anything to sit on, and so we paved it and put a new wall up and everything. Much needed improvement. The parks, Linder Park, replacing wooden bulletin board, kitchen, farm, sink resurfaced. Has anybody been in the Linder house? It's, everything's like original, and the sink was one, so it was rusting, and we had it resurfaced, reglazed, and to be able to keep the integrity of the house instead of replacing it. Lower Millcrest soccer field, we had a soccer field application. We had to stay off the field for a year to have it, but right now I went down and looked at it. We're going to have it. I guess it's going to be an ongoing thing for every year to have it resurfaced. I mean, just retreated, I guess. And but it's getting utilized a lot. I mean, on weekends and league and stuff like that. So, let's go on. This is the one on the right here. Is of course the new bulletin board. This one right here was ready to fall. He pushed on it and almost fell over. Ryan Carpenter did this for us. Mike did a great job of, trying to get back to the original look and building a lot more, stable. This is the soccer field. This is where we cleared the old fence out, and I don't know why I can't find my picture of the old fence, the old wooden fence. And this is what it looks like, with the new fence on it and the windscreen on there. This is the EV charging station. This was a project that started in 21, believe it. When I first came here, Tom Perry had started this, and it was a time when material was not easy to get a hold of, and they had to. Our EV charge station was on a boat trying to get here, and it was just a process, and was finished in 23 with the parking lot and with the charging station and everything. And right now, I get notices on when people are charging on it, and my computer's dinging all the time, so it's paying for itself, I think. Projects in progress for 24 right now. I'm working on engineering drawings for women's shop. This is for the fire department. We have a women's shower and locker room. This is something that started about 2 months ago. We're trying to get all the drawings together for hopefully to maybe get some women's locker room in there next year. For the fire department, and like all these bigger projects just take a lot of time. It's just time consuming to talk to engineers, pick the right one to get your bids, and it's just a process we have to go through to make it work. And it can last anywhere from 6 to 8 months. 2 or 3 months just for the engineer drawings, and 5 or 6 months for the project to get complete. Depends on how extensive the project is. Recreation, right now we got drawings for elevator, engineering drawing. That's another big project. We have to be ADA compliant or work towards getting ADA compliant. HVAC lighting grant, we're working on that with Amoresco. We're getting that's the grant the $247,000 grant we got for all the lighting for community center, public works, recreation, and fire department. But we're hopefully get started with that on the just probably the end of September here. We're talking about 2 to 3 weeks when we get started. We're waiting for the material to come in. And community center, engineer drawings for an elevator there. So once again, we need to work towards getting ADA compliant. Lighting grant windows on the first floor are right now being installed on the first floor. They started yesterday. They should be finished up by the end of the week just for the first floor. They're looking amazing. You go chance to go by and look at it. We also had some, it's not mentioned on here, we had some, the entry to the hallway stair that's been painted. We had the 1960 paint job in there, and it was much needed so we got that done already this year too. So the Public Works, we're having office upgrades, and we're going to just be painting, putting flooring in, something that hasn't been done in probably 30 years over there. Ceiling tile probably, and so an HVAC that we have continuous problems with. were leaking and stuff, so we had to replace that. It's probably about 30 or 40 years old. Police department, we're doing a pole barn, a public works for them for their, I guess, investigation of, cars and stuff like that. They have a storage, have a place to put them. Asphalt work at the academy. It's going to be new asphalt put on the parking lot with a new drive going into the Park Avenue with an apron and stuff. HVAC ventilation at the academy. Something that needs much needed for there to keep them up to code. Parks, playground equipment. I've been working with Emily with Jim of the Highlands. Thanks, Emily, for helping out there, getting the playground equipment to happen for the Lower Millcrest. And I could go on and on about a lot of projects. I didn't list, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. These are more of the future projects, I guess. So, I always like to leave the last year the presentation with a quote, but I'll read what I said, up here first. All projects are a team effort, being part of a team where all departments work together towards a common goal that benefits the citizens of Norwood is something we continuously strive for and take great pride in. And I always like leaving with a quote: "No man will make a great leader who wants to do it all himself or to get all the credit for doing it." That was given to me by a really good friend of mine. So anybody got any questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Braden.
Mr.
Thank
Braden.
you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. Hackworth, that's a whole bunch of projects, buddy.
Yeah.
Did you just tell me that that hallway to that community center ain't been painted in 60 years?
I would say so.
Are you serious?
I'm not
That's pretty
for
funny.
I'm not for sure,
I'll
but
try
it
to
looks
do the
like
math.
it.
I'll try to use my fingers. I come up with like 60 plus.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it looked like it.
So I guess my comment would be, and maybe Mr. Gears, Mr. Moore can correct me, but that's a whole lot of work, man. For what I've been aware, I don't know, about 10 years now, I haven't really noticed this type of improvements to this community, and I'm just noticing it. And I don't know if I just want to make sure that 10 years ago, I didn't think this was happening. So I'm just very proud to be part of it. You rock. So great job, man. Administration, all the way down, top to bottom, man. Nice work.
John, any other questions?
Mrs. Bowling.
This is not a question, it's a comment, but I've been watching them put the new windows into the community center,
okay.
and they look great.
Don't they?
Yeah, they look wonderful.
Any other questions?
Mrs. Franzen.
I just want to say thanks for everything you do, but especially the playground stuff at Millcrest. I'm glad, I saw the email, so it looks
Yeah,
good.
it's really neat to come in, and see what it was and what it comes. That's really neat to see from my job. I get to see the beginning, and I get to see the end, and I try to share as much as I can with everybody. But it's really a good feeling, to get it done. Any other question?
Mrs. Winterbauer.
We've been at Lower Millcrest a lot. We're a soccer family, and it's just been amazing to watch that field transition.
Oh yeah.
But it was that really hot week where most kids' practices were canceled. And I walked out of my house and I was like, Augie, you cannot practice. And we went down to Lower Millcrest and it was like 10 degrees cooler. The air felt so much better.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you can practice down
Yeah.
here. So it's just a great location, safe
Yeah.
for the kids. And the field it's just nice to sit there and see it.
And the field gets utilized a lot, and we're at the really do some aeration there this year and get it back to where it needs to go again. It's just a continuous thing. Yeah. So there we go. Anybody else? Mayor? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on, we have no public hearings. Request to address council. First I have is Pastor Peter Mingle. All right, you have 5 minutes, and if you want to come to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Peterson William Mingo. I'm the pastor of the newest church, I believe, in Norwood. Okay. We're at 2141 Williams. We've been there since the first week of February of this year. Okay. We plan on becoming a part of the community, being involved in whatever manner we can, especially with youth athletics. We have a rites of passage program that's basically first cousin to bar mitzvah, when kids come together and basically write out their life plan. We have an anti-drug program, anti-violence program, and we also have a scholarship program. And we're hoping basically to build something in the community that would bring all the church congregations together, that we can move forward together and make Norwood a city that everyone would be proud to be in. I know the mayor, you know, some friends of mine, and just wanted to introduce myself. And there's some issues that we've had and that we will have, I believe. And I believe they're going to be addressed next week at a hearing. So we just don't want to basically, you know, ruffle any feathers right now, and we'll save it for them. Man. I'm a Vietnam veteran, 1967 to 1971. Disabled veteran, at least the Marine Corps says I am, and VA says I am, and the check I get says I am. So I go with it. But I'm one of 26 children, 15 boys and 11 girls. So I know how to have and I know how to have not. And so I just said all that just to introduce myself. I'm a survivor. I'm also a fighter. I've had my jaw broken 3 times. I've had 2 concussions and shot twice. So nothing's new to me under the sun. I've had a lot of adversity, and I will never, ever, ever give up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next request to address council is Bishop Sonny James.
Good evening, everyone. I have to say to my dear friend, now that's absolutely the nicest that I've ever seen him, and it looks good on him. Greetings to each and every one of you. I first want to say that we had the film premiere, and I know many of you weren't able to make it. I do want to take my hat off to Mary C. Miller and Dane. They came, and you're talking about a star-studded cast. Anybody, let me say this though. Just because you weren't there doesn't mean you're not anybody. So the way this is going to sound is not what I'm trying to say. But anybody who thinks they're somebody or is recognized to be somebody, we're there. It's a little over 100 people, and just given the introductions, it was one judge, one congressperson, one senator, one lawyer, after another lawyer, after another lawyer. It was phenomenal. And I was just so honored to be a part of it. And it was the precursor to our 2nd annual March celebration parade that we will do again in October. The mayor did a wonderful job last year. He blessed the family and was there. And this year, I encourage all of you to come as well. We're going to have many, many more than what we had last year. Everyone at the thing, they were so excited. We raised an awful lot of money that night as well. And I just want to encourage the residents of Norwood, when you hear about this coming up in the end of October, please prioritize it on your schedule. What it shows is how we are moving together as a family. And that's what means the most to me, that we can continue to show people who we are as one people. We all have had discrepancies. Well, let me back that up. You all have had discrepancies with me. However, Mr. Braden and I are evidence that brothers do fight, sometimes literally. But we can come together and still say, I love you. We can still find value in each other. And that's what I want to do moving forward. In closing, Tyreek Hill was just faced with an ordeal with the police department. Tyreek Hill is a famous wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins. And they drug him out of the car and put him face down on the ground. But why I mention that to you all here in Norwood watching and listening and you here is when he was on, I think it was News Nation or CNN, and they said, okay, Tyreek, so what now? Tyreek Hill said something that I believe in my heart, and I want you all to hear from me now. He said that I want to come together to not just showcase the bad, but I want to give this an opportunity to move us together, move us forward together. And I believe if we plan the anti-crime and gun violence things that you will see us doing, some of you are already seeing us do, we're going to make a difference in the lives of people. But at the end of the day, I want us to make a difference in the lives of the people that move to Norwood and stay here because they're our family. So in October, everyone please come out to our second annual Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth March Celebration Parade. I'll be getting with the administration so we can once again make sure that it's on the books and approved. When you see our anti-gun and crime violence programs at Victory Memorial Park, please come out. We'll be back out in 2 weeks. Call me, 513-487-8843. Call me. We're going to go right to the streets and let our Norwood young folks know the guns have got to go. And so will the violence. God bless you all. Have a wonderful evening. And all I can say is go Norwood. God bless you all.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to follow up, if I can, I'd like to just say something to Mr. Pastor Mingle. I just appreciate you coming here today, sir. A lot you said in that short time kind of hit me. I'm also from a huge family. I really like that. But I just want to welcome you to Norwood, welcome your congregation, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to pray that you win thousands of souls to the Lord tonight. So I appreciate you coming here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, third readings of ordinances and resolutions. And this is an ordinance authorizing an agreement between the City of Norwood and the Board of Hamilton County Commissioners relative to the improvement of Montgomery Road. Mrs. Bowling.
I move that we have the third reading.
Motion by Mrs. Bowling to have the third reading of the ordinance. Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I'll vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have the third reading of the ordinance.
An ordinance authorizing an agreement between the City of Norwood and the Board of Hamilton County Commissioners relative to the improvement of Montgomery Road.
Thank you. Is there a motion to pass the ordinance? Mrs. Winterbauer.
I make a motion to pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to pass the ordinance. Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I'll vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to second readings of ordinances and resolutions. We have an ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance Section 1759.07, nuisances, to revise the type of weeds determined to be a nuisance. Mrs. Franzen.
I move we have the second reading.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen to have the second reading of the ordinance. Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I'll vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have the second reading of the ordinance.
Ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance Section 1759.07, nuisances, to revise the types of weeds determined to be a nuisance.
Thank you. Moving on to introductory readings of ordinances and resolutions. The first is an ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Franzen.
Make a motion to suspend the rules and have all three readings?
Motion by Mrs. Franzen to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance. Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce, I'll vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all three readings of the ordinance.
Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mrs. Bowling.
I move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mrs. Bowling to pass the ordinance. Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I'll vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to next item, ordinance amending section 527.03 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Waste Disposal as amended. Mrs. Franzen.
I move we have the first reading?
Motion by Mrs. Franzen to have the first reading of the ordinance. Mr. Gerton.
That motion.
Seconded by Mr. Gerton. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? Yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have the first reading of the ordinance.
Ordinance amending section 527.03 of the Norwood Codified Ordinance entitled Waste Disposal as amended.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item, it is an ordinance superseding Ordinance 47-2024, which amended Ordinance 18-2009, implementing Section 3735.65 through 3735.70 of the Ohio Revised Code to establish a community reinvestment area in the city of Norwood, to revise certain procedural requirements and reflect changes in state law, and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Winterbauer.
I move we suspend the rules and have all three readings.
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance. Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I'll vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all three readings of the ordinance.
Ordinance superseding Ordinance 47-2024. Oh, you know what, this doesn't have the whole thing, I'm sorry. Which amended the Ordinance 18-2009, implementing Section 3735.65 through 3735.70 of the Ohio Revised Code to establish a community reinvestment area in the city of Norwood, to revise certain procedural requirements and reflect changes in state law and declaring an emergency. Ordinance superseding Ordinance 47-2024, which amended the Ordinance 18-2009, implementing Sections 3735.65 through 3735.70 of the Ohio Revised Code to establish a community reinvestment area in the city of Norwood, to revise certain procedural requirements and reflecting changes in state law and declaring an emergency. Ordinance superseding Ordinance 47-2024, which amended Ordinance 18-2009, implementing Sections 3735.65 through 3735.70 of the Ohio Revised Code to establish a community reinvestment area in the city of Norwood, to revise certain procedural requirements and reflect changes in state law and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to pass the ordinance, please.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Is there a second? Mrs. Winterbauer.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? Yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to administration reports. Mayor Schneider.
Thank you.
Button.
It's like his familiar little nickname for me, isn't it?
Right.
Hey, Buttons. Okay. I would like to thank Peterson Mingo, Reverend Mingo, for being here, because I walk around, his new church is close to my house, and I walk past there, and what I've noticed right away is the exterior of it looks so much nicer. They've already redid all the planting areas, the landscape stuff, and really makes the area look nice. And then even driving past there on a Sunday and watching all the people going into the congregation and stuff, they dress for church. And you don't see that at a lot of churches. They dress up, but it's dressed. There is definitely some respect given to the church and to everything that's going on there. I appreciate you being here and introducing yourself. And I know you've invited Debbie and I to come to service one Sunday, and we'll get around to that. That would be interesting for us to go to a different church, being Catholics that have always went to, and Baptist church sometimes and stuff. So interesting, but. There are a lot of developments going on. You guys already realize, you probably read the article in the most recent Cincinnati Business Courier about Factory 52 and the expansion there. That's pushing that whole investment in our community, $250 million on a property that was the playing card property where Bruce Willis did his movie. So we did a movie here, right? And we haven't seen that movie yet. And then there was a Bruce Willis movie that actually even had the Happy Hollow and sort of Doral Field in it and some other stuff. So, but to think back just a few years, that was just sitting there, a vacant old industrial spot. And now to go there and look at what's going on and the amount of people that are there and the people that are at Aces in the mornings playing pickleball and all the different things, it's incredible. So that's an incredible improvement in our community. The Fun Factory site, the Sherman that you got just at the last, council meeting, we were talking, there was discussion about the Sherman Avenue development going on there, and that being the multifamily that's going in there. And then Walson Way improvements that are going on. I think the Safety Service Director just approved or just went through the vetting process for the crossing on Montgomery Road at Walson Way. It's Cincinnati that's actually putting it in there. Luckily, we don't have to spend a bunch of our city money on it, but that's going to be a nice improvement there, and that'll connect the Walson Way Trail over to Xavier's campus. And I took a stroll down through that area to look at where the Walson Way campus will be. And it's interesting because Xavier has a lot of landscape areas where they're planting milkweed and different things that allergy sufferers aren't going to like, but the butterflies like, So it's going to be interesting as that connects across. And then I worked all the way over to Mentor Avenue where there's the access will be once we get control of those train tracks and how we can extend that on through there. And I walked on over to Crosley where there's a portion of land on Crosley that's a park sort of parkland that we cut, but nobody really utilizes it. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting as we get that project going. And I still have a lot of, there's still a lot of way to go on that, but it'll happen. So then the Bridget Kelly Norwood Lateral 562, notice they've got a ton of the paving equipment there. So they're getting closer. It was pushed back a little bit. I think it was supposed to be opened up like this week or soon, but it'll be a couple more weeks because they ran into some more challenges with the Ross part, that's the elevated part. But they continue to make good progress on that. 561, which is Carthage Avenue and Smith Road, right? 561 sort of cuts through in that big X. They started up on Carthage, up in the Carthage area. So Carthage has been milled and they're starting to do some, then they'll have to do they mill it. They will do a leveling coat on it. They will adjust. So this is a part where we get a lot of questions, and council members, you'll get a lot of questions because they'll come in and do a leveling grade on it. So they do that, and then they start adjusting all the lids. So, there's different utility organizations that have to come in and adjust their lids. So there might be telephone wires ran through there, and there's accesses, and then there's MSD, the sewer lines, and then there's storm sewer lines that have to be adjusted. All of that to get it to the right grade for when then they put the final coat on. So that's all a process of it. So we'll see them working on that. Working up sort of what I consider to be the north end of 561, which is at Carthage Avenue, and then they'll come down and work on this. And we would have liked very much for all of that work to be completed before the school season started. But we don't own the paving companies. They set their schedule. They were awarded the bid and knew what our time frame was, but that didn't work out exactly the way we wanted it to. And then one of the other things is we got the RRFB crossings going on Montgomery Road right now. Everybody knows what RRFB stands for, right? It's the rectangular, rapid, flashing beacons. I had a discussion with Clint. Clint throws that stuff out. You know, as the superintendent, he throws all that stuff out. But those crossings are being improved, and we're looking closely. The administration is looking closely at the paint scheme and at the plan for the north end of Montgomery Road when that gets repaved. We've been working a lot on this central business district section and making sure that the sidewalk, the bump outs and the sidewalk and the pedestrian safety improvements are, and now we're sort of looking up at that end and trying to look at how we maintain the proper flow and the proper parking and the proper pull-offs for buses and all the different things that will make that will improve the safety up there and also continue to keep the flow going. So there was one comment made, you know, when you talk about deferred maintenance, and there's been deferred maintenance in this city. And for years, the city went through times, harsh times, really rough times where it was hard to even make payroll. So you might look at some of these deferred maintenance projects that the project manager is working on and saying, wow, how did it ever get that bad? It got that bad because we were really struggling money-wise. Luckily, we've been doing pretty well. You know, through my time, we've always had, you know, some money coming in, and we've made improvements. We're running the city as business-like as we can and trying to do what we can with the money in the best way possible. So, you know, we're lucky to have that. We're lucky to have a good project manager and a good safety service director that are working on these projects and keeping the flow going. But, you know, you can't look back on previous years and say, well, you know, why didn't this get done that way before? There were extreme challenges that went. I mean, we went through a recession. We went through a lot of stuff in the last 10 or 15 years. So we're making progress, and all we got to do is keep our eyes on the prize, which is a forward, which is in front of us, and keep moving in that direction and be positive. And we can continue this. We can keep moving and making improvements and really satisfying the needs of our community. So that's all I have.
Any questions for Mayor Schneider? I do have one. And it's really about the traffic pattern, I guess a temporary traffic pattern along Robertson, where they are, yes, I guess a temporary automated light at the intersection of Beach and Robertson.
Did they just do that?
It just screwed up. Sorry, I'm out of order.
Well, the safety service director's here. He'd probably be better to answer that than me.
Mr. Powers.
Yeah, that is part of the multicolored demolition project. So that is definitely very temporary. We've had police officers go out, check it out, make sure everything is safe, that it's set up the way that it ought to be. I would say expect that to be out there a couple of weeks. The time frame depends a little bit on how they take that building down and what they find as they take that building down. So could be a little bit shorter, could be a little bit longer, but definitely expect that to be out there for the next few weeks.
So for anyone watching, or for those of you here, they have, at Kenilworth and Beach, you cannot go from Kenilworth over to Robertson. That portion of Beach is currently closed. And Robertson at Beach, right there at Angelo's, who is also celebrating their 50th anniversary.
I stole that from you.
There is a temporary traffic light for one line of traffic going from Beach, Robertson to the Corporation line. Or I believe it might be on the, right after you cross 71.
Can I do an addendum to my?
Yes, you may. Mayor Schneider.
So you had talked to me about a cone that was sitting in the middle of the street.
Yes.
And that was an MSD. There was a break in the pipe system there, and they made the repair, but I noticed that the cone is now just sitting on the blacktop repair.
It is.
So that'll be removed pretty quickly. I think the repair has finalized and
Correct.
we can get that cone out of the middle of the street. I know how concerned you were. But also I'd like to say, when you, Mr. Powers, when you say temporary, what does that mean? Temporary to some people is, it'll be gone in 3 days, and other people it's 2 months worth.
I would say expect that for somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks.
That's longer than temporary, I think, but okay. Don't go that way.
Thank
That's
you.
all. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. President. I did want to express my thanks to the mayor for acknowledging the difficulties. It's like, why wasn't this done? It's been, 10 years ago we weren't doing this stuff, and I appreciate him acknowledging, he was on council for a while, that how difficult things were. And it's a lot of stuff that is piled up, and it's really nice to see this room look decent. It's really nice to have my offices look the amazing way they do. My thanks to Mr. Hackworth, because I really appreciate that. One other note, last council meeting, council passed a resolution of an intent to place special assessments on some of the properties here on Montgomery Road to move the utilities underground. A part of that process is we have to send notice to the property owners. We have to serve them with notice the way you would with the civil suit. So we have sent out my office coordinated sending out the certified mail to all of those owners. Those have all been delivered. There's a few that are post office boxes and the notices haven't been picked up, so we're still waiting to hear back. And then the owners have 2 weeks to file an objection or a claim for obvious damages. And if we don't hear anything in 2 weeks, then council can pass the next piece of legislation that will then let us move forward. But I just want you to, that's the process, and those are out, and we're just waiting for that notice to finish and the period to come back. So expect to see another ordinance, hopefully at the next meeting.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Moore? All right. Moving on to unfinished business. Mrs. Hoover.
I just have one. I reached out to the Norwood Library and found out that they also carry gun locks for those 18 and over. So no one has an excuse to have an unlocked gun. As we mentioned at the last meeting, you can get one for free at our police department. So also at the Norwood Library for 18 and up. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other unfinished business? Any new business? Mr. Braden.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I just got two things. One thing, someone brung up a flag on top of Ventura's building that's pretty tattered. If anyone knows, if anybody knows them, that maybe can put a bug in their ear, that if they need help with the flag, I've heard of people that would gladly donate a flag to them if they need it, or help to install it. Also, I wanted to put out there that I will not be at the next council meeting. What is it? I'll be out of town, so if anybody needs me for the next meeting before, thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other new business? Ms. Royce.
I just wanted to thank everybody who came to the Montgomery Road cleanup on Saturday. I saw the mayor there. I saw Mrs. Hooper there. It was just nice to get out with our neighbors and do something good for the community. So I want to thank everybody who organized and showed up. That's all.
Oh, Jeff
Thank
was
you.
there.
Oh, and Jeff, I apologize. He's one of the organizers, so Jeff knows he's included.
Mrs. Franzen.
Kind of related to that, I was going to do a Parks and Public Places meeting, and I wanted to put in investigating, like, some cities ban smoking and vaping in public parks, and Ms. Royce commented to me, and other people commented, how many cigarette butts there were to clean up in Victory Park and other parks. I don't know if that's appropriate for Norwood or not, but I wanted to kind of just put that out there. Other cities, there's a sample legislation. So if you have any opinions on that, I'd love to hear about it. I also wanted to try to schedule a parks meeting. I need to check with Mr. Gafford, who is currently on vacation. So I will get back to those of you on the Parks and Infrastructure meeting about that. Just putting that out there. To Mr. Braden's point about the flag on the Ventura building, if someone gets a hold of him, the Boy Scouts do flag retirement ceremonies. That might be something they would be interested in helping with. You don't have to do a ceremony to retire a flag, but it's a thing that they do sometimes to kind of show the kids there's a proper way to do it. So just something to think about if anyone gets a hold of the Venturas. And I had one other thing, and I didn't write it down, but I believe it was that we have the International Art Show, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, the 21st, from 2 to 7 at Victory Park. There are a bunch of different artists from around the globe and from here. A lot of them live in the Cincinnati area now, but came from other countries, or immigrated here. So feel free to come out and support our local artists. There will also be some craft vendors that you can buy from. You can buy from the artists as well. They usually have prints and original pieces. And there will be a band at 7 that you can listen to. So we have a whole day of nice weather, hopefully, and some fun, tough stuff.
Thank you. Mrs. Hoover.
I want to share that the Norwood Police Department will be hosting the National Night Out here in Norwood on September the 17th from 5 to 7:30 at the Paycor parking lot. It's a very family-friendly event. They'll have lots of police departments. Last year they had the police dog was there, the fire department was there, lots of local social service agencies were there. It was a really lovely time. So again, September the 17th, 5 to 7:30, the Norwood Police are putting that on. Lots of other police departments will be there. And actually, I totally forgot to mention Angelo's Pizza, but not only is it their 50th anniversary, but I understand they're doing something with trees connected with Keep Norwood Cool. Does anyone know about that?
Tree on the patio.
From?
That was from Keep Norwood Cool.
There we go. Thank you very much. I knew there was a connection, but I couldn't find it on the
They're
Facebook.
tree huggers. They're pizza huggers and tree
I
huggers.
mean, trees are just all good. More trees, more trees. That is all I have. Thank you.
Any other new business? Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to respond to Ms. Franzen's comment. I believe the mayor and I have attended several of those flag retirement ceremonies, and they are beautiful. So you're correct. I appreciate you saying that. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mrs. Franzen.
I apologize.
You remembered?
I did remember. So I just wanted to put out there that the Gem of the Highlands 5K is coming up here in 2 months. It is the first Saturday in November. We will be back on Floral and Washington. There's a free after party for everyone. Ron Murphy should be there with slinging some burgers and hot dogs. Free pizza. There's a kids fun run that is also free. And if you want to run or walk, you don't have to run. I want to emphasize, no one has to run. We will not force you. It is only $30, and you get a T-shirt, a free beer, and a bunch of other free swag and free food at the end. If you can't, or if you don't want to run or walk, you can still just come to the after party. We won't be checking.
Thank you. Mrs. Bowling.
Just an addendum to Councilmember Franzen. The proceeds from Gem of the Highlands go to support the Norwood Parks. Another reason to register.
Yes.
Mrs. Franzen.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowling. I'm fairly tired, and that
You've
is
been
an
doing this
important
a long
point.
time.
Yes, I've been doing this a long time. So yeah, this is a year 7 of our event. We're back to the start. We're back to where we started in front of New City Presbyterian. And we've been able to donate over $70,000 to Norwood Parks over the past 6-7 years of our existence. Over 70,000. 70 with some zeros, 70. So, yeah, we're hoping that, we don't know, there's no way to tell sometimes with smaller races, but we hope that this will be our biggest year yet. We're aiming for 1,000 participants. Last year we had about 700. Realistically, probably more like 800, but 1,000 is a great goal. So you all can help. Again, you can just sign up. You don't have to run or walk.
Mrs. Hoover, you had your hand up earlier.
I was gonna say what Mrs. Bowling said, so thank you.
All right. Anything else under new business? I did have one item. I received an email about the parking lots at Millcrest, so the lower Millcrest and the soccer field. And I'm not 100% sure if this is something that would get placed in the committee, or Mr. Powers, do you want me to forward that over to you?
Yeah, if you'll forward it to me, I'll take a look
Okay.
at it, make
All
some
right.
recommendations.
Thank you. I believe that is it for new business. All right, moving on to communications. We have one, and that is the Ohio Division of Liquor Control regarding a Trex at 4EG Rookwood LLC. I guess there was one, I'm going to consider it an objection. Building department stated that a building permit for the Roosevelt Room has not been issued, nor a certificate of occupancy issued by the building department. And I do not believe there were any other objections from any of the other department heads. Mrs. Hoover.
I have a question. Do we know the location? I know it's at Rookwood, but I couldn't figure out, based on the address, what space
Aside-
they were.
Aside from the suite number, I'm not 100% sure. They mentioned suite 107, but I'm,
Okay. I was just wondering if anyone knows where that is.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. It says the Roosevelt Room. Did you read
The-
that? I can't figure that out.
The Roosevelt Room is a business up north in Liberty, but it's moving down here, but I don't know what
Yeah, I
space
think-
they're taking over,
Exactly.
or, I believe the Sprint store was listed.
Good question.
But-
I'm curious too. Thank you.
Mrs. Bowling?
The address is particularly Rookwood Exchange, so it is in the same building where Agave and Rye is, not in the primary Rookwood. So worth noting. But I also searched the suite number, and the suite number came up as the entire building, so I don't know that that's really any help. But it does appear, based on the liquor license, that they are moving the Liberty location of the Roosevelt Room to Rookwood.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Question through the chair to law department, Mr. Moore. Does this, the building department, saying that there's no building request, or is there occupancy? Is that an issue for us approving this? I mean, probably not.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. President. It kind of depends on why the building department hasn't issued it. This is not, for a normal, like, we're going to get a new liquor license or a regular transfer, that's not grounds to deny them. The fact that it's not zoned to, the building is not zoned to allow that kind of business is not grounds to object to a liquor license issuing. This, however, is a Trex transfer, and so this is a question of whether the city thinks that allowing this liquor, them to transfer this liquor license in from out of the city is going to encourage economic development. And I would say, based on the fact that their location, that it's really, they just haven't gotten to the point of requesting the building permit and the occupancy permits for that location. So I wouldn't consider that to be a relevant issue here, because if they can't get their building permits and occupancy permit, they won't open, even if they have the liquor license.
Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate that.
Questions? We can move on to a motion to, Mr. Braden.
Sorry to cut you off, sir. Motion to receive and file without objection.
Motion by Mr. Braden to receive and file the letter without objection. Is there a second? Mrs. Franzen?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Franzen. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Mr. Royce? Yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. We have no absent members. Is there a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Bowling.
I move we adjourn.
Motion by Mrs. Bowling to adjourn. Mr. Garten.
I will second her motion.
Seconded by Mr. Garten. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? Yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. This meeting is hereby adjourned.